But this is one of our Teacher Spotlight events. We are doing a guide to extended techniques with Dr. Nicole Riner. Really excited to have her today. And I'm going to kind of step back and let her take the wheel here. I will sort of monitor the chat for Zoom if you want to bring up some questions. Nicole, do you want people to be able to chime in with?
I'm cool with it, sure. And just in an effort to make sure that we get through all of the extended techniques, I thought I'd just kind of check in around 20 minutes after, see if people have questions, and take questions again at the end. But certainly, either chat or just unmuting and shouting out your question, I think if something is unclear in the moment, is fine with me.
Cool. Okay. That works for me. And I just want to thank everybody for coming. We do these on purpose for free for people who are our customers and teachers who want to do stuff like this. So I want to thank everybody for doing this. It's part of our Teachers Club program called Club FCNY. So if you are a teacher and you have students shopping or you are shopping yourself, sign up because you get benefits and uh, benefits through the Flute Center for yourself and for your students if you're shopping. So that's really it. I'm going to step back and let Nicole do this and enjoy, everyone.
Thanks, Alex, and it's great to see everybody. Thanks so much for joining us on this Sunday right after New Year's. And I want to say too, thank you to Flute Center of New York for making this possible. I have certainly benefited from some of these workshops, and so have my students, and I'm really happy to be doing one for you today. And Alex has taken care of my studio at the University of Wyoming through Flute Center of New York. Any number of times, I think just recently in the last month actually. So Flute Center of New York and working directly with Alex has been our favorite way to get great instruments. And I didn't get paid to say that. I wanted to, I don't know how many of you know me. There are so many of these and so much social media going on. So I wanted to just take a moment to tell you kind of how I came to play this kind of music. Because it came later for me, and maybe it will for some of you as well if you haven't done a lot of this, and I think that's great. Besides teaching at the University of Wyoming, I'm also the president of the Flute New Music Consortium, and an altus artist. And it's funny the number of times I've spoken with people, particularly in the last decade or so, I guess, and they have reflected to me this sense that they've always known of me as a new music person. And, you know, I will be introduced a lot of times as a new music specialist or interviewed for my new musical opinions. But it's funny to me, honestly, because I spent many years, all of my student years, feeling really intimidated by this stuff. And I'm extremely grateful to the teachers I had. They were amazing teachers, and I was lucky enough to go to really great schools, and it was a very stimulating time being in college and grad school. But my teachers, for the most part, couldn't help me with this stuff and didn't really have an interest in it. So I would meet other people who were playing new music, and I would think it sounded so cool, and I would look at their scores and I would think, I don't even know how that's music. I don't even know how to read this, you know, and I just sort of put that in a box in my head and thought, well, that's really a cool thing that I can't do because I don't know how to do it. That's the end. And so I love giving this workshop because the way that I learned how to do these things pre-YouTube tutorial was just asking people who knew some stuff to show me what they knew and figuring it out on my own on the flute. And all of that really, for the most part, took place after I finished my doctorate. So any time is a good time to get started on these extended techniques, and you can do whatever you want with this information after today. You can say, that lady's crazy, I'm never doing that stuff again. You can say, all right, now I have a way to sort of help get my students started. Or, you know, you could really take these techniques and run with them. And you might decide to do different things at different points in your life. But it's never, obviously you're here, and so I think you realize this, it's never too late to learn some new sounds that you can make on the flute. And what I love about extended techniques, besides the fact that it opens up a whole new world of repertoire that you can play, is that it's really all about just giving you more sonic choices. So, you know, any of these sounds are just in addition to your normal traditional playing that you've been doing for years, but it just adds to your sonic vocabulary, which I think is the most rewarding thing. I mean, what we're all shooting for is total sonic control over our instruments so that we can make whatever sounds express the moods, emotions, ideas that we want to express in any given piece. So what I want to do today is, hopefully you've got flutes with you. That's why we've got you muted, so that you can just play to your heart's content without freaking out the microphones. But what I'd like to do is kind of just in alphabetical order go through the extended techniques that I find to be most prevalent in music. I'll show you how I'm doing it. Hopefully you can see my embouchure a little bit here. You can do it with me. I'll give you some tips for how to incorporate this into warm-ups when that's applicable, or just how to get the sounds out. And then I encourage you to just try this stuff with me. So, and then at the end, I've gotten permission from some composers to screen share, and I'm going to show you some little excerpts from pieces in my library so that you can see how extended techniques might be notated, what they look like, and what they sound like in context. And I'll play those short examples for you. And again, I encourage you to play them with me too. A lot of them are very sight readable. So mess around on your flutes as much as you want while we're going through this presentation. And if anyone's watching it afterwards on YouTube, I hope you'll play along too. So let's get started with flutter tongue. Flutter tongue is probably a pretty common one that many of you know, but it's got some nice applications, and there are a couple different ways that you can do it. So it's worth talking about how you might teach flutter tongue, even if you're already accustomed to it. Flutter tongue is rolling your R and blowing through that to get a pitch. So regular old D. So if you can roll your R's, then you're set. And it's always going to take what feels like maybe a little bit more air pressure, or at least definitely make sure you're using very aggressive air. And you want to think about just angling down a little bit more than you normally would into the head joint, really just to get past that extra interference from the tongue roll, because that's creating this constant blockage, right? However, some of us cannot roll our R's. And so if you can't roll your R, then what you're going to do instead is you're going to roll your uvula, which is like a gargling motion. And this is worth knowing how to do even if you can't roll your R's. So everybody give this a try. I want you to imagine that you're gargling. If you've got water, you can even literally gargle with some water right now. And you want to move that gargle up as far forward in your mouth as possible, right to the front of your throat. So as far forward as you can get it, that's going to get you a more convincing sound. So as I said, if you can't roll your R's, that's what you got to do all the time for flutter tongue. But often, even people who roll their R's will find that they lose the sound in the low register, because that tongue is just too active and it's hard to maintain sound in the low register. So a lot of times you might roll your R's in the middle and high registers, but when you get down to the low register, you might want to switch to that gargle. And if you haven't tried that, might not feel awesome to you right now today, but it's worth practicing and experimenting with. Right now, let's just do, I'm gonna base everything off a B flat major scale, because why not? And let's just do B flat to F. And go ahead and roll your R's if you can do that. If you can't, obviously join me in gargling. And da 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 da, ready? Go. You might find that you're angling down a little bit more for those first four notes, and then when you get to the F, you might have to shift up just a little bit more. So I don't know that you actually are doing that, but we might just need to exaggerate in our minds those shifts that have to happen, since we're a little bit distracted by the tongue. Now, if you did roll your R's before, I want you to just give that gargle a try. Just see what it feels like for you. So now we're all going to be gargling, playing the same notes. Ready? Go. give both of those a try. If you feel like the gargle has some promise for you, practice that a little bit and see if you can use that as well. It's just nice to have the use of both if you can. And the last thing I want to say about flutter tonguing is it's a great warm-up, actually. There are a couple of things that I really get out of my students at University of Wyoming if I have them doing some of their tone exercises with flutter tongue. One is that you've really got to move the air. And another one is that you become much more conscious of what it feels like to have an interruption going on in your throat, which is what you have with flutter tongue, versus really opening that throat. So if you or a student is tending to play with a tight throat or tending to not always, just spin the air fast enough, this is a great technique to just add to any old long tones at all. So let's give it a try once. I don't know, I guess B flat to F again, if that was a long tone for you. So whichever way you want to flutter tongue, do that first. And now go ahead and play those same notes without the flutter tongue. So you can see in comparison how much freer that feels and how much easier it feels to move the air. So it's just kind of an obstruction that becomes sort of a speed bump that your students have to get over if they're working on either moving air faster or becoming more aware of what they're doing with their throats. And I'm just checking, all right, checking chat to make sure no one's got questions yet. Let's go on to harmonics. Harmonics are another thing that you might be familiar with. They do show up in a fair number of tone exercises. And they're also not only an extended technique that shows up in a lot of literature, but a really great tone exercise to do. I do them every day. I have all my students at UW do them every day. Harmonics are great for flexibility and really isolating what you're doing with embouchure aim to get your notes out. So I grew up with the Trevor Y tone book. That was my introduction to harmonics. That might be true for a lot of you too. And the first thing that he does is at the top of the page, he has you just play the whole harmonic series off of low C. If you think about sort of the Pneuma Pro, if anyone's ever used a Pneuma Pro, or you think about an actual visual aim for each note that you play on the flute, you're just going to be aiming on this imaginary string in front of your faces, higher and higher for each partial. So let's give that a try together. This is just low C, nice slow whole notes. Now we'll play through that whole series up to the high G. So here's low C to start. Describing to yourself and to your students how you're getting those notes. I like to think of that aim, as I mentioned, and also as I'm shifting up, I'm really just bringing my lips forward more for each note. It's a great exercise in exaggerating what your face has to do when it makes dynamic changes or large leaps, octave leaps, and things like that. And as a warm-up, I like to take that line that Trevor Y writes at the beginning of his page of harmonics, in which we just played, and just go back and forth to really memorize where those notes go on the head joint and strengthen flexibility. So rather than just a whole note, I would take the first two notes and do 4 quarter notes back and forth, and then land on a whole note, and then the next two, etc. I'm going to start playing that now, and I encourage you to join me as you make sense of the pattern. So I'm starting on low C again. just do a little cool down and go from the top down. So I like to do that. That was my first time doing it today. Thanks for your patience on my warm-up. I like to do that off of low B. If you've got a B foot, C, C sharp, D, and E flat. And if doing that many partials off of the D or the E flat is too much of a stretch, work up to it. You know, every week that these get stronger, you can just add the next partial in the series. After E flat, it starts to get really quite tight and flat, and it's not a great aural skills exercise, so I just call it quits at E flat for the low note. But that's a great daily warm-up for flexibility and just accuracy on your head joint. In terms of performance, harmonics are usually best played without any vibrato. It's usually supposed to be some kind of ghostly, spooky sound. So I would encourage you to really try playing them with no vibrato or very little vibrato, so that you don't add too much meat and, you know, earthiness to it. It kind of takes away from that ethereal quality. Next on my list is the jet whistle, and that didn't used to be so common. Maybe she'll see this cameo later, but I blame Nicole Chamberlain. I blame Nicole Chamberlain for all the jet whistles in our repertoire. She's on record as saying this is her favorite, and she writes them a lot. So they're fun. I don't practice them except when I have them in a piece. I can't say that they do anything great for your Mozart or anything, but they are pretty fun to do. And I've seen some people teach them in this very physically dramatic way where you do this spinning out and fling your hair like Chopin. You can do that if you've got a ton of rests on either side of your jet whistles, but that's not always going to happen in a piece. So it takes you a moment to get to the jet whistle and get back to normal playing position. So my aim is to be as efficient and simple as possible and get the maximum sound with the minimum amount of work. That's kind of my philosophy of life, actually. So what we want to do is get a fast, you know, kind of whistly sound from the inside of the tube. And that's going to take a nice tight seal around the embouchure hole and super fast air. The mistake that people make is they think they have to blow straight down, and it's just impossible to get much sound because you run out of air right away. So let's do this first. This is the first thing my students tend to do, and then they start kind of hyperventilating. You're gonna wrap your lips, or really nice tight seal of your lips on the outside of the hole, so there's no leaking of air, and then you're going to blow as hard as you can straight down into the tube. Doesn't feel great, right? You're really trying, but that air leaves you right away and you don't get a great sound from it. Now, what you want to do, instead of trying to get the air into the bottom of the tube, which is the furthest away from where your mouth is, you want to try to hit the air on the inside of the tube, right the part that usually faces towards your audience. So the closest side of the inside of that tube, that's the shortest distance your air will travel, and then you'll be able to get a good sound. So we're going to go back and make that tight seal around the outside of the embouchure hole again, but then we're going to do a little combination of picking up our heads and rolling the flute out without breaking that seal. And now I can get a much louder, higher pitched sound because I'm only having to travel a short distance to really get that sound against the metal. So if I'm straight down, the air leaves me right away. But if I roll out, then I get a nice loud squeak, so to speak. And then you've got the control to change the airspeed or the length of it to get louder or softer. You know, so you've got some control over blowing harder and harder to get a more and more aggressive sounding jet whistle, which, for instance, the very first jet whistles, which were written by Villa-Lobos in the piece called The Jet Whistle, has you at the end playing longer and louder jet whistles over and over again. So you can just keep blowing harder and get more and more aggressive jet whistles. You can also get pitches out of your jet whistles. So let's try those. Let's do 5 again. Again, off of the B flat scale: B flat, C, D, E flat, and F. So you're just going to finger those notes and blow in the same place each time. Nice seal around the outside of the hole, and then blowing rolled out so that you're hitting the closest part of the metal inside. Ready? So hopefully you can hear a little bit of pitch difference there too. Composers will sometimes specify the pitch that they want you to finger and sometimes not, but if it's not specified, you should take some creative control and decide what makes sense with the music on either side of it. So that's my most efficient way to get a powerful jet whistle without getting dizzy or falling over. Key clicks, and again, if you have questions about any of these as we go along, I think I'll do 2 more and then take a quick question break. But if you've got questions now, drop it in the chat or feel free to unmute. Otherwise, let's go on to key clicks. Key clicks are another one that I don't practice unless I have to, and the repair tech at Altus does like to yell at me for doing these. He can always tell when I've done more than my usual fare when I send my flute to him. So it does, knock around your flute a little bit. The mechanism gets a little worn out over time. But key clicks are just what they sound like. You're just clicking a key and fingering, whatever pitch has been written on the staff, usually with an X, and it will often say key click above it too. And I'll show you an example here towards the end of class. The most effective sound that you can get from a key click is to use your ring finger of your left hand as your articulator. That works really well as long as the pitch changes are happening in the right hand. So if we try from low B, I don't know if everyone's got a B. Let's go from low C to be safe. From low C chromatically up to F, what you're going to do is finger that pitch, but you're going to use your ring finger, picking it up and then slapping it down hard as your articulator. Let's try that all together, or a second time if you did it with me that time. We could go up to G2, F sharp, G. So you can really hear a pitch there. Normally you're gonna, of course, have your flute on your face. But it sounds pretty much the same. You'll have your flute on your face because you're most likely coming from some kind of playing, going to another kind of playing, right? The challenge comes in composers who don't stay in their lane and stick to the right hand. And so quite often flutists will not do this, but sometimes non-flutists will have you doing something where the fingering is only in the left hand. And then obviously if you have an A key click, it's not going to work to use your ring finger as an articulator, or it's going to come out as a G. In that case, I just slap everything I can all at once to make as much sound as possible. So G, obviously still no problem. A, and C is the least effective because that's a pretty small key to slap. But once you get into just left-hand fingerings, slap everything in a timely manner so that you don't have little flams in there, but do your best to get the sound out. It does become a little less resonant when you've got less of the tube closed, when you have fewer fingers down. So let's try that once, doing a chromatic scale from low C to middle register C and back down using just key clicks. Ready? Go. Yeah, and that's it. They're a little challenged in terms of resonance, and your best bet is to slap as hard as possible. But they don't always come off terribly well in a noisy hall or when you're very far away from your audience. So if at all possible, if you're playing something that's really got a lot of meaningful key clicks in it, and you can get yourself in a more intimate space, people will be able to hear that better. Multiphonics. Multiphonics is just the general term for any time a composer writes something in which two pitches or more should come out at a time. Robert Dick is the guy who cataloged all of these fingerings back in the late 70s. And The Other Flute, I think it came out in 1980. That is kind of the Bible that a lot of composers use. And he methodically went through and found all the alternate fingerings that would yield multiple pitches coming out at a time. It's a really great book to own if you're going to really dedicate yourself to doing new music. If you're doing any composing, if we have any composers in the group here today, it's definitely a good book to own. But most of the time, a composer will write the fingerings in that they want you to use for multiphonics, thankfully. It'll either be in the performer notes at the front of the score or just right over the notes in the context of the score. So I own The Other Flute, and I probably haven't cracked it open for about 15 years. The composer usually does the work for me. So it's, wait and see if you actually need that book. But really everything is generally coming from there. Multiphonics are a really cool way to try to harmonize with yourself. And you can't be a purist. This is not going to be bel canto style flute playing. So these often sound a little bit like train whistles, I think. In fact, Ian Clark uses them in The Great Train Race to great effect to make train whistle kinds of sounds. Elizabeth Brown uses them a lot to try to imitate shakuhachi sounds. So there's going to be a hollowness and a lack of purity to the tone when you do any of these multiphonics. And there's going to be a little bit of a challenge in terms of deciding exactly where that point is on the head joint where you can get all of the pitches out. You all know a multiphonic fingering right now, whether you realize it or not, and it's the D above the staff. So I'd like for us to experiment with that for a moment, because it's a great example and very doable, I think. Whenever I encounter a multiphonic, I always want to isolate the two or more pitches that are notated that are supposed to be coming out. So obviously, if you play D above the staff the normal way, it's going to be a D. That's why it's called a D above the staff. But if you aim a little lower and or slow down your air, try that once. And this is kind of hooty sounding, right? It's not a beautiful tone. It's a middle register C. It's a weak middle register C, but it is indeed a middle register C. So if I want to play my D as a multiphonic, the first thing I want to do is isolate those two pitches so that I know where both of them lie on my head joint. Again, going back to this idea that everything really, it's about aim. Everything has a home on your head joint already. You just have to find it. So go ahead and do that a couple times back and forth, D and then that weak C. So you should be hopefully getting an idea of where you're pointing your lips for the D and where you're pointing your lips for the C, right? Now, do that a couple times and then meet in the middle. So if your D is one angle and your C is one angle, find where you can meet between those 2 points and get both of them to speak. And you can hear that D creeping into the C. My approach was to get the C and then aim a little too high until I started hearing the D. If you aim too high, then the C goes away, right? That's just your ears telling you to angle it down a little bit more. Angle down a little too low for a normal D, conversely, and you have some of that C in there. So there's your multiphonic. So The multiphonic will have a home on your head joint. You just have to find it, and it's going to be traveling between those 2 points and finding that place. And then, like the tone of any other note, you're practicing just hitting the bullseye every time when you're working on your multiphonics. The other thing I will say about the multiphonics, which may sound obvious, but in the heat of the moment, sometimes it's not. There's always a weaker note and a stronger note. In this case, obviously the D is the stronger note, right? It's the one you've been playing since you were in 6th grade or whatever. And that C needs a little bit of babying. It needs a little extra care to make sure that the C speaks. Whatever the weaker note is in the multiphonic, as you're first learning that multiphonic and isolating the location of each pitch, you're going to notice right away which one takes a little more work to really get to come out. That's going to be the one that you want to pay the most attention to. So between the D and the C is weak. So when I have a D-C multiphonic, I'm always aiming for the C first and then creeping up and getting some of the D in there. That way I know that I'm not just going to default to the stronger note and have the D overwhelm the C. So we really want to hear as close to equal pitches as possible. So you're just going to coddle that weaker note. Make sure that that's the one you're aiming for, and then shooting for the other one to kind of creep in, if that makes sense. We're halfway through just our expose or whatever of these extended techniques. Is everybody good? Does anybody have questions on anything so far?
At the moment, you've made everything pretty clear.
Great. Thanks, Jimmy. Everyone else good? If so, oh, the jet whistle from the side. Okay, yeah. Let's see. So, get myself oriented here. So what I'm doing is I'm covering straight down, and then I'm going to roll out. So this would be straight down. And so I'm just kind of bending my neck and then letting my flute go out with it while keeping that seal. Does that help, Martha? All right.
What are your lips doing? Is it the outer part of the lip, the inner part of the lip? What's actually covering?
I'm kind of doing this. I don't know that it matters, honestly, as long as you get a seal and it's really pressed against the metal. I mean, it could be the outside or the inside, but my lips are not particularly voluminous, and so I think I'm kind of using the outside, the inside a little bit. You know, just to make sure that I've got enough cushion that no air is escaping, if that helps. So one of the things I love about extended techniques is that there's a little more freedom. There's probably a lot of freedom in many of the sounds we make, honestly, on flute. The flute fits a wide variety of faces, which is wonderful. But I encourage you to just experiment and see when you're getting a good seal and when you're getting that sound, and you'll kind of memorize the feeling for you. Hoo-wee. Oh yeah, that sounds fun. Yeah, hoo-wee is a good way to do it. What is the tongue doing? Nothing. It's just down and flat in my mouth. My tongue is just down and relaxed and out of the way when I'm doing that. Pretty much anything, unless I'm articulating, honestly. Oh, Nicole Chamberlain will be so proud. Any other questions about the jet whistle? Great. Awesome. And if you think of more questions, obviously, I'll take them at the end, too. Let's move on to pitch bends. Pitch bends are definitely a great aural skills exercise, and you should keep your tuner on too as you're practicing these and figuring out how you're going to do them. They're not going to always be notated very clearly. Most of the time the composer simply tells you what pitch they want you to start and end at. Robert Dick is an exception because, you know, he wrote the book on these things and he tends to write fingerings for you. But there are two ways to do pitch bends. One is just rolling in and out. That works really well on a super flexible note. So let's try a C sharp. There's a reason why C sharp is so hard to get in tune, but it sure is flexible. So on a C sharp, you can get up to a D easily. And down to a C, just by rolling in and out, just by moving your head or your flute. Right? The fewer fingers you have down, the more flexible and unstable really that note is going to be. And so you can do rolling in and out for your pitch bends. The challenge comes when you get to a more stable note, let's say a D. Middle register D has almost every finger down, and it is pretty solidly where it's going to be. So if you try to roll out to get an E flat, there's my E flat. It's not super convincing, right? I can get a little bit, and the reason is because you've got so many fingers down that you can't alter the pitch as much. So this is where sliding off the holes becomes very helpful. To go from a D to an E flat, it is quite comfortable and easy to merely slide gradually that hole, the ring finger of the right hand back until you're uncovering the hole. And if I play with just the rim down and then go back to an E flat, they sound pitch-wise the same. So everybody's flute is on a slightly different scale depending on the brand. That might not be true for you. That's where your tuner will tell you where to stop. Some people might only need to slide halfway or 2/3 of the way, but with your tuner on, it will tell you when you've hit an E flat, if that's your goal. So if rolling in and out on a note is not getting you enough of a pitch bend to be perceptible, then that's when you want to start experimenting with just sliding off those keys, just sliding back off of them. And you can always get a pretty good half step. If you have a larger glissando or slide that's written, that's 1/3 or more, then you're going to progressively uncover holes. And let me see if you can see my fingers here. So you can just keep gradually sliding one finger off at a time to keep bending that pitch up. And then it's just a matter of just practice, because coordination-wise that probably feels really weird at first, but like everything else you've learned to do, the more you repeat it, the more natural it gets. So let's just try, before we leave this, D sliding up and then back down to get D, E flat, D, and then we'll finger E flat. Same, ring finger is going to slide up to get to E natural, and then we'll finger E natural and slide the middle finger up and back down for F. So we'll try that twice, starting with D. We're just doing half step slides. Now E flat to E natural. Now E to F. How'd that go for everybody? So when you have it in a piece, you're going to get to experiment, use your ear, use your tuner, and figure out the most efficient way to pull off a clear glissando to the desired pitch, so that your audience can really hear that. And be creative. It might be a combination of rolling in and out and also sliding off of holes or off of keys completely. Pizzicato tongue is, I suppose pizzicato tongue is maybe almost creeping into beatboxing here, but I see it a lot in pieces that don't have anything else like beatboxing in them, and I see it a lot, honestly. So you can do it two ways. You can keep your tongue in your mouth, and you're going to two where you normally would two, which is probably like on the back of the top teeth or maybe that ridge above, but you're just going to do it real hard. I think of it as more of a TH just because that's heavier. And so if you try that without the flute, you're gonna feel that you're really tensing up your tongue. You're really using that whole muscle very aggressively, and then pushing some pretty hard air off of that as well, so that you get that kind of thwacking sound. I personally can't always sustain that with even resonance for very long, so I tend to, my tongue is outside, like I'm spitting a watermelon seed off, but again, very aggressively, so that I'm making like a thumping sound. So you can either behind the teeth or with the teeth or with the tongue in between the lips. And then your flute just acts as a resonating chamber here. So whatever you're fingering with either of those articulations, you're going to get some of the pitch and something that sounds kind of like pizzicato on a violin. So go ahead and try that on B flat. If you get a whole lot of it, it's gonna get a little spitty in there. That's all right. Hopefully the composer's given you a tiny break to recover before you go back to a normal note. But that's the essence of it. So this is now just a resonating chamber. You pick the pitch with your fingerings and just, it's all about that aggressive, hard tongue. Sing and play is another thing that I really like to use for students when they are similar to flutter tongue. Sing and play will also get you really moving your air. And it also kind of pitches your resonating chamber better. Robert Dick talks about this too. Sing and play means that you have to find the pitch in your throat, which just helps you to make sure that you're making the same pitch internally that you're going to be fingering on your flute. So it's a really nice way to help students who are trying to resonate more, who are having a hard time getting a bigger sound, and again, you know, students who are having a hard time moving their air. Again, it just gives them something to kind of push against. I did see that question. Yeah, Terry, I do think that you have to. I think the spring open of the mouth is part of pizzicato tongue because that's part of what gets the resonance there. So there's always going to be that little hesitation while your mouth is opening afterwards. Good question. So sing and play can be done in a number of ways. A lot of times you'll hum the same pitch that you're playing. Sometimes you will hum one steady pitch while changing the notes that you're fingering, and sometimes it'll be the opposite. You'll be playing one note and singing different pitches over that. And if you're having a hard time getting both started, not too different from multiphonics, you can try one and then add the other. So let's say that, and even if these things are easy for you, it's always good to imagine it's hard because you're going to have a student in front of you someday for whom it is hard. So let's go back to our good old B flat. And we're just going to go back and forth, playing a B flat and humming it. You could go in the lower octave if you want. Ooh. Ooh. And then try one or the other and add the second one. So you could go back and forth and hold the singing first. Ooh. I guess that's usually what I liked doing when I was first learning this. And so the singing is already happening, the air is already happening. All you've got to do is kind of angle that embouchure down and blow. You can also practice this on your hand to make sure that you're able to both sing and blow. And again, this is not going to be bel canto singing. We're not opera singers here, because blowing air out while you sing automatically changes the quality of the voice. But if you can maintain steady air on your hand while singing a pitch, you're singing and playing. Then on the flute, all you've got to do is use your embouchure to angle that air down enough that it registers in the flute. So, we'll try these things, obviously. If it's not working super great for you today, keep practicing it. But let's just throw ourselves into it. Let's try sing and play a couple different ways right now. So first we're going to, let's sing the drone. So we'll just sing B flat the whole time, but we'll play B flat, C, D, while you're singing B flat the whole time. Here's me doing it once in case that didn't make sense. Let's do it together. Nice. Now we will hold the B flat and sing those 3 notes. So we'll sing ooh while just playing B flat on the flute like this. So let's try that together. And then what most people probably find most comfortable, actually, let's use the singing to reinforce the playing. So we are going to sing and play in unison, B flat, C, D. One more time. And now try playing those without singing. By the way, really feels very free and resonant, right? So getting back to this idea of potentially using sing and play with your students to resonate and open up their sound, it really makes normal playing feel great in comparison. So that's sing and play. We've got 2 more, and then I'll show you some examples, and if you want, you can play along with me. The tongue ram, sometimes called a tongue stop, is exactly that. You're going to ram your tongue into the embouchure hole. So just like we did in the jet whistles, we're going to make a seal, we're going to make a tight seal with the lips around the hole so that no air is escaping. And then you say, it's like saying hoot, but as you hit the ta of the hoot, the tongue comes out and jams into the hole. It is pretty aggressive. A lot of fast air and a really strong tongue getting jammed into the hole. I feel always like it takes an enormous amount of air. And I feel like I'm really pushing very hard to get that air to be part of that sound so that you hear that sort of stopper sound at the end. And like most of these, whatever you're fingering, that's the pitch that's going to come out. But it's going to be a major 7th lower, which is kind of cool, right? Because it gives us bass notes we can't play normally. So if I finger a low D and do a tongue ram, the pitch that's coming out is actually E flat. So for this reason, I think you're often going to find tongue rams written in the low register as a way to extend our low range. So it gives us even lower bass notes than we can actually finger on the flute. So it's a tight seal around the hole and then very aggressively. That one takes a lot of muscle, so takes a little practice for most people. The last one I want to show you today, before showing you what some of these things look like in actual pieces that we have, is whistle tones. And this is another one I love to do every day, and I love doing them with my students at UW because it helps with embouchure flexibility, and it also helps with steadiness of air. So a whistle tone is not you whistling, but you aiming in a different place on the head joint to make a sound that sounds like a whistle. You really are not literally whistling. But what you're going to do is and try to snuggle up to the camera a little bit more. You're going to, on any given note, these are easiest to do in the third register, so that's where I always have my students start from. I'm going to demonstrate on a high A right now. Compared to your normal playing of a high A, you're going to bring those lips forward, like cartoonishly forward. It feels like, I feel like a Simpsons character here. And I'll show you from the front and the side. You're going to bring your lips way forward, and the hole's going to be a little bit bigger, thereby slowing down the air. So we want super, super forward lips, nice and supple forward lips, and a slightly bigger embouchure hole to get that whistle sound. So I'm going to go back and forth a couple times from the front, playing a normal A and then a whistle tone A, and then I'll show you from the side. And here's me from the side. So you can see that I'm much further forward and therefore aiming a little bit higher on the head joint, and the hole gets a little bigger. And this is how I warm up on whistle tones every day as well. I go back and forth. So I usually do a B major scale. And the goal is to get them to be on time more and more. I mean, it takes a while to hunt for them and find them. It's all right if they're not on time right away, but it's nice to have a rhythm there to strive for. The first time I had to learn a whistle tone was in Takamitsu Itinerant, which is a beautiful, beautiful piece with this ghostly whistle tone high A just in the middle of nowhere. And I was studying it with a teacher who had said to me, oh, I heard this piece at NFA, it was really cool, I want you to do it on your recital. Great. So I get the music, it says whistle tone, and I bring it in, and I said, what is this? This was 1998, so this was well before YouTube. And he said, I don't know. And I spent 2 weeks puzzling over how to get these whistle tones out. My point to this story is, if you don't get it for a while, it's okay. You will get it eventually if you keep trying. It's all about experimenting with that placement and the size of the hole, and you will get it. And Nicole, the speed is slower. The airspeed is slower. That's a good question. And the airspeed automatically becomes slower because the hole is bigger. You know, because the space in your lips is a little bit bigger, that automatically slows down the air enough. So it's not something I think that you need to consciously like really back off on your air. You're already doing that by opening the lips a little bit more. But yes, that will automatically slow down the air. So the air is a little bit slower, but has to be very, very steady at that slower speed. And then any tension that you've got out here in the corners has to be released. So that's why you can imagine it's a great flexibility exercise. My students often get whistle tones on the spot or after 30 seconds or so in a lesson, but it took me 2 weeks. So, but I really know that I value them a lot, and I benefit from them a lot. So I encourage you to experiment with them. If you're not getting them right now on the spot, play around with it and see what you can find. Okay, I don't see anymore. I have the chat up, or you can just unmute. Does anyone else have clarifying questions before we finish today by having me show you what some of these look like in music? Well, thank you for joining us, Valentina. Everybody else good? You want to see some music? If you've got questions after that, that's fine too. Let's give that a try then. Let's see how long my awkward pause is as I try to share screen with you. All right. Can you see my examples? Great. So these are all great pieces that are worth looking up, and I'm happy to share these titles with you afterwards if you want to get in touch. But I just grabbed from the headlines. I just grabbed these from music that I've done in the past several years. Here are two different examples at two different times in this wonderful piece called Four Pieces by Joseph Hallman. First, he's got, as you can see here, he calls them whisper tones. That's synonymous for whistle tones. And so they will often be notated with this little diamond head, and it will say WT or W or whisper tone or whistle tone above. So here's me playing from the beginning of the line. And then we've got flutter tongue. That's what these lines mean. As you know, my dirty little secret, I'm going to be doing it from my throat. Feel free to play along if you want. And dum ba dee dum, ready? So that's all it is just keeping that roll or gargle going through those notes. This piece, Trillium by Elizabeth Brown, is one of my favorites to start students on when they haven't done any extended techniques yet. Elizabeth Brown, if you don't know her, is a flutist from Alabama. I think she lives in New York now. She has studied shakuhachi extensively besides being a classical flutist. Really beautiful human being who loves to hear from you if you're playing her pieces. And because she's a flutist, she writes really well for the flute. These things lay really well under the flute. And so what I'm about to play you is from the second page of Trillium. You see a pitch bend right here. She's got some just funky fingerings to make kind of a shakuhachi sound here. And then you've got multiphonics here that she's written. She's written the fingering for the multiphonics she wants you to use. And then pitch bends. So we're hitting all of these at once. So that's what all of those look and sound like. This is a quite new piece that the Flute New Music Consortium commissioned by composer and flutist in New York, again, Yoshi Weinberg, during the pandemic. And so what you see is their harmonics. They're opening this piece, Some People Are Flowers, with harmonics, and then using harmonic fingerings as tremolos to get different colors within the pitches that are written here. So these are all different ways of using harmonics, actually. Great piece, definitely worth. These are all great pieces. It's worth the learn. Ian Clark, The Great Train Race. I just grabbed this for the sing and play here on this chromatic line. And if it gets a little Jethro Tull and a little dirty in there, I think that's definitely in the spirit of most sing and play. Second to last thing I want to show you is this excellent piece by Zach Latino that won the Flute New Music Consortium composition competition back in 2021. That's how I learned about this piece. And so what they've done here is they've written in rapid succession back and forth a tongue ram, remember that, and a key click. And they got good advice, it's an E, so I can use my ring finger of my left hand as an articulator. And this opening is just what sometimes gets called an Aeolian sound. You're just making a sh sound over the hole and moving that air. And then we've got a harmonic there at the end as well. So they've created this really cool groove, this rhythm that comes back again and again on the first 2 pages just by going back and forth between the hoot and the key click. The last one I want to show you is another one of my favorites to do with students who are just learning extended techniques. And this one is such a hoot. It's absolutely my favorite, and it totally sounds like a carbonated beverage to me. So you're going to see pizzicato tongue here, and that's often the way it will be notated, just the, you know, the abbreviation PITS. We've got jet whistles, because it's Nicole. And then we've got a little bit of beatboxing syllables. The click is just clicking with your tongue on the roof of your mouth, like what you probably did when you were kids in the car for too long to irritate your parents. And the za is just, you know, just a very accented way of saying za. So I'll play it through. It's very repetitive. Feel free to jump in when you get the hang of it if you want and play along with me. So that's how all of that works. Anybody want to see, I know we're at time, but anybody have questions on any of these examples before I stop screen share? Feel free to just unmute and call it out.
Hi, I have a question.
Oh.
How do you prepare for when you're playing and singing? Let's say you're playing with flute, a long part, and then you have this play and sing, like 2 notes. How do you prepare to exactly aim for those notes that you have to sing for the real pitch?
It's practice, you know. So I treat it. I've gone back to the example that I showed here. I've gone back, or I just woodshed it, you know. So because what I have to do is exactly as you said. I have to be able to get the aim right and find my voice exactly at the right time. And so if I was having a hard time with this F, what I would do is maybe play the right note though. So I would just do that, you know, for like 30 seconds a day. You could separate it too if doing both together is too much. You could practice just singing the F for 30 seconds and then just playing the F. And then eventually put those together. So it's really just the repetition of your face, your throat and your face finding it over and over again until it feels secure. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. Any others? If not, I will stop screen share.
Okay, just last one, sorry. What's the name from the composer Elizabeth, her last name?
Elizabeth Brown. Here she is.
Okay.
And this piece is called Trillium. She has several pieces with very similar techniques. Trillium is the shortest one. And so I think it's a good one to start with if you're interested in her style.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to close this out for now. And I also want to drop in the chat if anybody has questions for me in the future or would like suggestions of repertoire or, you know, like to see on paper anything that we talked about, please feel free to email me at this address. I'm happy to keep in touch with anybody. Alex, I don't know if you have any typical way you like to close these things, so I'll hand it back over to you.
Oh, sure, yeah. As long as no one else has anything else they want to bring forward, just thank you everybody for coming. We do kind of have this format open to people as well. So if you have a class you'd like to do, or presentation you want to present, I will actually give me a second. I can send the form right now to everybody. You can sign up and do this. We just kind of go through things and we'll reach out to you if it's something we think would work for this format. Otherwise, if you're not a member of Club FCNY, again, feel free to join us there. There was some info in the sign up form. But I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Sunday, and a big thank you to Dr. Riner for doing this today. It was fantastic. And we will have this up and available for kind of a viewing again in a couple of weeks. So if you missed anything or want to revisit anything, you'll be able to do that.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for joining
Yeah.
us.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn more about our guests, there's more information below. If you're a teacher, make sure to sign up for Club FCNY to unlock free shipping, extended trials, and commission for teachers, as well as other exclusive benefits for you and your students. As always, remember to like, comment, and subscribe.